I'm a much better player physically, mentally than I was last year.
For months. That is how long Alex Eala has been carrying a single moment in her chest, replaying it the way you replay a dream that almost had a perfect ending. January 10th, Auckland, New Zealand. The crowd is barely breathing. Eala is serving at 5-3, 40-30 in the second set. 1 point away from a WTA final. Everything she had worked for compressed into a single swing. She tossed the ball, wound up, and went for it. A forehand, hard and flat, aimed straight into the deuce corner. The kind of shot you hit when your body already knows it is over, when winning feels inevitable. And then it sailed long. By centimeters. Centimeters. Wang Xinyu exhaled. She broke back. She walked away with a result that, by every measure of what had happened in that match, was never supposed to belong to her. And Eala stood there, racket in hand, having just watched a WTA final slot evaporate in real time. The thing about moments like that is they do not simply fade. They settle into you. They become fuel or they become fear. And what happens on May 8th at the Foro Italico in Rome is about to tell the entire tennis world exactly which one it became for Alex Eala. Because the rematch is here. And nothing about the woman stepping onto that Roman clay 2 days after dismantling Magdalena Freck in 3 brutal sets looks anything like the player who missed that match point in Auckland. To understand why this match feels so different, you have to go back to Auckland and actually watch what happened, not just read the score. The scoreline says Wang Xinyu won 5-7, 7-5, 6-4. What that does not tell you is that Eala was broken twice in the opening exchanges and trailed 0-4, looking every bit like a player about to get shipped out of the tournament before it really began. Then something shifted. She started moving through Wang's serve with a rhythm that visibly unsettled the Korean player. She reeled off 6 consecutive games. 6. She took the first set 7-5 with tennis that Wang herself would later struggle to find the right words to describe. Eala built a 5-3 lead in the second, served for the match, reached 40-30, and then that forehand went long. What followed was immediate. Wang broke back without hesitation, stole the second set 7-5, and then broke twice in the opening games of the third to lead 4-0. By that point, Eala had also called a medical timeout for a back and shoulder issue. She was injured, a set and a breakdown, and she had just handed away a match point she had earned. The easy version of this story ends there. But Eala came back out and broke Wang to make it 5-4, forcing her to serve out the match under real pressure. The final points were not comfortable for Wang. Nothing about that match was comfortable for Wang. And she said so herself. Standing at the post-match press conference as the technical winner, Wang Xinyu looked into a microphone and said that Alex is such a fighter and that she felt pressure even when she was leading 5-1. She said Eala just relaxed and started playing amazing tennis in the first and third sets, putting her under great pressure the entire time. And then she said the words that have been sitting in the back of every Eala fan's mind ever since. She said there was nothing much she could do other than clap for Eala's good shots. Read that again slowly. The woman who won the match said she had nothing to do but applaud the player who lost it. That is not a post-match compliment. That is a confession. And now those 2 players are about to walk onto clay in Rome, and every single condition that defined Auckland has been flipped completely upside down. Start with the surface, because the surface is where everything changes first. Wang's victory in Auckland came on hard courts. Hard courts are where her game breathes easiest. Flat striking, first strike aggression, short rallies, quick points. That is Wang at her most dangerous. Clay is the opposite of everything that sentence just described. The ball slows down. The bounce climbs higher. The rallies stretch longer. The game rewards patience, topspin, and the kind of physical and mental endurance that turns a match into a war of attrition rather than a firefight. Every weapon Wang used in Auckland becomes harder to deploy the moment her shoes hit red clay. And here's the part that makes the surface conversation genuinely fascinating. In the entire history between these 2 players, they have never once played each other on clay. The only data point Wang has in her favor, that 1-0 head-to-head record, was built on a completely different surface. It is not a clay record. It is a hard court record wearing the costume of a head-to-head advantage. And on May 8th, that costume comes off entirely. Now let us talk about what the numbers actually say about Wang's serve, because this is where Eala's left-handedness stops being a biographical detail and starts being a genuine weapon. Wang lands her first serve at 64.4%. She averages more than 3 double faults per match. In nearly 8 out of every 10 matches she plays, she records at least 1.5 double faults. These are not catastrophic numbers in isolation, but on clay, where the surface absorbs pace and first-strike tennis demands more margin for error, those numbers do not improve. They get harder to manage. And then factor in who is standing on the other side of the net returning her serve. A left-handed returner. The angles that Eala generates from the left side pull Wang's serve wide in directions that right-handed returners simply do not create. It is a structural problem that the statistics have been pointing toward all season, and Rome's clay is about to bring every single one of those numbers into full focus. Then there is the form gap, and it is not subtle. Wang's most recent match before arriving in Rome was a loss to Elena Chariva, a player sitting well outside the top 100 at a WTA 125 event in La Bisbal. A WTA 125 event. She then received a first-round bye in Rome, which sounds like a gift until you realize what it actually means. It means she enters this second round. Match carrying match rust, carrying no clay rhythm, and carrying the weight of that loss still sitting somewhere in her body. She has not played a competitive match in days. She has not won one in weeks. Eala, meanwhile, walked onto this same Foro Italico clay 2 days ago and ground through 3 full sets against Freck. She came back from 3-1 down in the deciding set, the exact kind of pressure situation that has historically tested her. And she did not just survive it. At a changeover while trailing, she told her team directly that she was not finishing points with enough intensity. And then she went back out and immediately corrected it. That is not a player running on hope. That is a player who has learned how to diagnose her own match in real time and fix what is broken while the points are still being played. Monday, Wang lost to someone outside the top 100. Wednesday, Eala survived a crisis and won. Thursday, Wang sat in a hotel room with a bye and waited. The momentum in this match is not evenly distributed, and it has not been for some time. Because when you zoom out and look at Wang's 2026 as a whole, the Auckland week starts to look less like the beginning of a breakthrough and more like an outlier that she has been chasing ever since. She beat Eala in that Auckland semi-final on borrowed time, and then could not turn that borrowed time into a title. She lost the final to Aleksandra Sasnovich 6-3, 7-6. Then, at Indian Wells, Agla Tomiljanovic dismissed her 6-3, 6-1. Her trajectory is not upward. It is a player who had one excellent week in January and has spent the months since trying to find it again. Eala's clay season has not been flawless either. Stuttgart, Linz, Madrid, all early exits. There's no point dressing that up. But here's the thing about clay losses versus the Freck match in Rome. In Stuttgart and Madrid, when things went wrong, they stayed wrong. In Rome 2 days ago, when things went wrong at 3-1 down in the third, she fixed them mid-match. That is the difference. Not the losses. The response to the losses. And beyond the head-to-head and the form and the surface, there is something else at work here that is harder to quantify, but impossible to ignore. When Eala walked onto court against Freck, she was walking onto the same clay where 12 months ago she lost 0-6, 1-6 without winning a single set. Rome had swallowed her whole in 2025. She came back in 2026 and took it apart in 3 sets. That is not a coincidence. That is the kind of psychological reset that changes how a player carries herself into every match that follows. Matt Wielander, 3 French Open titles, Eurosport's most respected analytical voice, a man who speaks about clay the way someone speaks about a language they grew up in, watched Alexandra Eala and reached for 4 words. Hands given by God. A 3-time Roland Garros champion chose those exact words to describe a 20-year-old from the Philippines. That is not a broadcaster looking for something nice to say. That is someone who has watched this sport at the highest level for 4 decades, recognizing something rare and saying it out loud. Wang's own press conference told us what Eala does to opponents during a match. Wielander's assessment tells us what Eala represents to people who have spent lifetimes understanding this game at its core. Together, they are not a compliment. They are a verdict. And then there is what a win here actually means beyond the scoreboard, because the stakes of this specific match extend far past the second round in Rome. World number 2 Elena Rybakina, Australian Open champion, Stuttgart clay court winner this season, is the most likely third-round opponent waiting for whoever advances. Rybakina and Eala have never played each other on tour. Not once. The moment that match is confirmed, it stops being a match and becomes an event. Every tennis broadcast, every major outlet, every social media feed in the sport turns toward it simultaneously. But the ranking picture matters just as much. Eala holds almost no points to defend in Rome and at Roland Garros combined after first-round exits in both events last year. Every round she advances here is not just points gained. It is a net gain stacked against nothing. Everyone pushes her live ranking back toward the career high of 29 she reached in March. And Roland Garros begins May 18th. These two tournaments are not separate items on a schedule. They are a runway, and right now she is accelerating toward the most important clay stretch of her career. For the Philippines, for every Filipino watching from Manila to Dubai to Los Angeles to Riyadh, every round in Rome lands differently than it does anywhere else. This is not just tennis coverage. It is appointment television at 2 in the morning. It is people setting alarms and refusing to go to sleep and gathering around phones in apartments and living rooms because missing it feels genuinely unacceptable. The story does not need to be sold to that audience. It sells itself, round by round, point by point. And none of it happens without getting through Wang Xinyu first. The honest version of this story does not erase Auckland. It includes it fully. The missed match point, the medical timeout, the 4-0 deficit in the third, the final game, where she could not break Wang when it mattered most. All of it is part of the picture. But also part of the picture is that Eala came back from 4-0 in that third set injured and forced Wang to earn every single one of those final points. She did not disappear. She competed through every moment of it. And when it was over, she did not disappear into the off-season either. She was back on court days later at the Kooyong Classic. She entered the Australian Open for the first time in her career. She worked through a clay season that handed her nothing, and she arrived in Rome and turned it around in 3 sets against a player who gave her every reason to fold in the third. Nobody gave her a bye when the clay got difficult. Nobody scheduled her an easy path. She walked through every match and earned this rematch the hardest way available. That is the version of Alexandra Eala, who walks onto the Foro Italico clay on May 8th. Not the player who sailed a forehand long in Auckland. The player who has been building towards something since that moment, and who is stepping into it right now, on the surface that asks the most of you physically and mentally, against the only player who holds a win over her. Wang Xinyu arrives without clay rhythm, without match sharpness, carrying a loss to a player outside the top 100 as the last competitive result her body remembers. She arrives on a surface that erases her only head-to-head advantage. She arrives against a player who already proved 2 days ago on this exact clay that she can come back from a losing position and close it out. And she arrives knowing, because she said it herself into a microphone in Auckland, that there was nothing she could do but clap. That was on hard courts. This is Rome. This is clay. And somewhere in the back of every mind that watched that Auckland night unfold, there is a forehand that sailed long by centimeters and a player who has been running toward this rematch ever since. The clay has been waiting. And on May 8th, it finally gets its answer.